And we are live. Welcome, folks, to my segment for the Expert Council Q&A podcast this week. It's the only piece of the show that I'm live streaming. This is one of 7 segments. We've got a really great show today. If you want to check out the audio version, there's a link down in the video notes below. Because I'm doing this as a breakout individual segment, it'll probably be about an hour after this live stream ends before that link will work for you. It'll have all the resources and stuff I talk about in this segment, plus everything else the podcast usually has. Today we've got Ron Paul along with Chris Rossini talking about the end of American Empire, Tim Cook about building a handyman business. We've got not John Pugliano, we've got Matt Sursley talking about if you are a business owner, you have an LLC, an Inc., an S Corp, whatever, there's a form that you need to file this year that if you don't file it, you're going to get royally screwed. And we got a bunch of other cool stuff going on today. Update from Patrick at MT Knives, building your own solar system from Sean Mills. So if you're new to my channel and you're seeing this, just know this is part of a much broader podcast. And we usually live stream 3 days a week. Today's kind of a bonus on a Thursday where we're talking about the Bitcoin ETFs, which is what I want to get into now. So my segment today for this podcast, again, is about the Bitcoin ETFs. And I'm basically coming at this from 2 angles. The first one is, what does this mean for Bitcoin as a whole? And it's really the second one. It's the second piece I'm going to talk about. And because the other piece is, will the uber toxic maxis that have been spewing FUD about this ETF for 3 months roughly now, and they've been ramping up their FUD as we've gotten closer and closer. And I want to be clear, a lot of these people I really do. Probably the worst attention whore in this has been Max Kaiser, and I've always considered him a little bit of a freak, but overall liked him in general. And he's gotten so bad with it, I've stopped following him on social media, probably not permanently, but at least until he shuts his hole about this. But a lot of other maxis, I won't name them, I don't want to really call anybody, I'm calling out behavior, not the person here, have just been talking stupid about this. They're saying things like it could destroy Bitcoin. You can't go out, guys. I mean, really, shut up. You can't go out for some of you guys 5 years, some of you guys like me 10 years in this game, saying it's immutable, uncensorable, indestructible, but if BlackRock has an ETF, it's all over. Like, you sound retarded when you talk like that. Don't go linking an ETF creation by the SEC to a bill proposed by Senator Warren, who has never proposed and passed a bill in her senatorial career. Okay? Like, just stop it. Stop it. So what I want to talk about is, how do these ETFs work, and how some terminology that's being used by people that know better is being used to scare you from the Maxi side. Then we'll talk about what it really means. So the biggest thing that they've run their holes about is that these are all cash in, cash out funds. Well, I think there's something like 60 other ETF categories that's the case with. It's not the only one. It's not like this is somehow different. And just understand what that means. That means that you put cash in and you get shares in the fund, and you get, if you sell your shares, you get cash out. That's all that means. It's the on-ramp, off-ramp for Bitcoin inside certain vehicles. And we'll get to that in a second. We get into what it means. But the term cash creation, oh, it's fiat. This is a person who either knows better and is dead-faced lying to you, or a stupid person that doesn't know what something means, so they decide it means a thing without checking to see what it means. So what does cash creation in an ETF mean? It means that when I put cash in, the fund manager takes the cash, buys the underlying asset if they don't already have a reserve for it, and that action creates the share. It is not creating money out of thin air. It doesn't work that way, and anybody that tells you it does is too stupid for you to spend one more molecule of oxygen going into your body on listening to that person. Even if they are otherwise a smart, intelligent person, they have checked out of the building with their brain for this discussion, and they need to be ignored. That's how it works. You maxis need to shut up or start talking truth, one or the other. Because this is the straw man fallacy. If you own an ETF, it's not your keys, not your coin. No one's saying any different, dumbass. No one has said any different. You shouldn't buy your Bitcoin ETF. Don't sell your Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin in an ETF. Like, no one's saying this because they know they're full of shit. And I think it's because they just want attention. And they, if you are a Bitcoin influencer and you're a Maxi, the one problem you have, I mean, you made the right decision. Don't get me wrong. The problem you have, since you don't have a show like mine, you're not going to like turn around the next day and talk about how to plant a garden. You only have Bitcoin. So you have to come up with some shit to talk about. It's the only thing there. So FUD sells views better than no FUD. I can attest to this because I fight it all the time. You guys know if I wanted maximum viewership, maximum listenership, maximum numbers, you know what I would do. I would get on the air every day and tell you how bad everything is and tell you the world is going to end and you need to get your beans, bullets, and Band-Aids or you're all going to die. Because when I do a show that's even in that vein, my viewer count on a live stream goes through the roof. My total number of downloads goes through the roof. I get more attention that way. But I'm more concerned with the truth than attention. Some of these people, I guess they're not. So now let's talk about what is the purpose of this ETF and what does it mean for Bitcoin long term? The purpose of a Bitcoin ETF is not for a person that wants to stack Bitcoin long term with money that they have freely available. If you have money freely available, like you have cash, it's not in any sort of institutional form. It's not in an IRA. It's not in a 401k. It's completely available to you. And the purpose of you buying Bitcoin is to hold it approximately forever. And you buy an ETF, I agree, you're an idiot. And no one in the Bitcoin community that's been stacking stats for any length of time is saying anything other than that. So shut up and quit acting like people are. The purpose of an ETF is to release institutional money that otherwise could not buy Bitcoin, or to allow people who have some mental block from buying it on exchange and holding it in cold storage to buy it. Well, I'm trying to educate those people to what freedom looks like. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck what you're trying to do. Do you not understand? That is the whole point of why all of us who've actually been doing what you say you're doing anyway, Maxis, which is stacking your ass off. This is why we're all about to become incredibly wealthy, and we are. And it's not too late. You didn't wait too long. Look at the price today. It hasn't moved much. We'll get to that. But the window's closing. And I've told you this was coming for years. I told you this was inevitable. And I think it was about 3 years ago. I said, I don't know when, but it's inevitable. And I said, probably 2023 back in 2021. And I expected it to be early. So I'm off by about a year. Wham. It's still inevitable that this would happen. You have, what do you Maxi say? The hardest money known to man. Well, there's an ETF for every hard money, for every asset class out there today. You can invest in dialysis equipment through an ETF, basically profiting on the misery of type 2 diabetics the system created. How in the hell are you going to sit here and preach how hard as money Bitcoin is and expect there wouldn't be a bit? There's a dollar ETF. There's a euro ETF. There's a gold ETF. There's a silver ETF. There's a cadmium ETF. There's a nickel ETF. Okay? There are ETFs for everything. Of course there was going to be one for this if it was what we said it was. Right? That's right. If it was what we said it was. And it is. So this was inevitable. Who is going to buy this and who should buy this? You might think, well, you just said that you're a Bitcoin Maxi, Jack. You're just not one of these jackass Maxis. And you're all in on Bitcoin. And you only talk about Bitcoin anymore. And you've got a cold stack of Bitcoin. So clearly you're never going to buy any Bitcoin in an ETF. You would be wrong. I will absolutely buy Bitcoin in an ETF because I have a great big IRA account. I rolled money from 401k inside that IRA. It's really easy to buy Bitcoin now. But Jack, you can set up, yeah, but I have contribution limits if I set up a straight IRA for Bitcoin. If I go tomorrow, I have contribution limits. And it's much cheaper to trade in and out of Bitcoin in an ETF than it is on an exchange. So traders are going to migrate like crazy to this. That's going to pump liquidity into the market. And what's going to happen is exchanges like Coinbase et al. are going to lower their fees to compete. So that's good for stacking. You're starting to see how this all works together, because if I have a choice and I can pay Van Eck 0.25% and buy at spot, or I can give Coinbase or Gemini or whoever their fucking huge fee that they're charging, what do you think I'm going to do if I'm a trader in it to make money? That's not what I am. But there's lots of them out there. But Bitcoin's not for trading. It's to be the hardest. They don't care what you think. Stop thinking only about your little world and think about the broad, dadgone world of the whole globe. The 8 billion people you've been talking about competing for 21 million units of Bitcoin for 10 years. And now that's a bad thing because you got nothing else to say. There is more money out there in forms that can't access Bitcoin until yesterday than there is money that could access it before yesterday. All the money that's coming up till now, there's more of it available in this institutionalized world than every penny that's coming up till today. You have to really think about that. So, Jack, I've got this on social media. Like, I don't get it. It finally passed. Nothing happened to the price. Of course it didn't. And I told you last week, when it happened, don't expect anything to happen right away. The damn thing's only been trading for a day. I think it started trading today, right? It just started trading. These funds just started trading. Now, what's going to happen is you have 11 giant corporations with billion-dollar marketing budgets, and they are all now fighting to become the GLD of Bitcoin. There will only be one of these funds that is truly dominant. You'll have kind of a number two, like a Hertz and what was it? Budget. We Try Harder, or whoever the other, like the number two was, and the number two was way behind. And then you'll have like a bunch, and some of them will literally just not work out. They will not have enough inflow because there's only so many places for it to go. So now they all have to fight. And they only have really three things they can do to fight for attention. Straight up marketing. So they all have to do that. So that's good for Bitcoin, because people talking about Bitcoin is good for Bitcoin. Okay. So they got that one. They got fees, and you can't go lower than zero, and you can't make money at an eternal zero. So they all have to have some kind of a fee, 0.2, 0.15, some percentage that they have to compete with. And transparency. Transparency is going to be, well, here's our addresses so we can be audited. That's it. That's all there is. There's nothing else for them to compete with. So they have to go out and beat each other's guts in to gain capital, because you don't go out and spend tens of millions of dollars like these companies did to get something approved and then sit back and go, if it didn't work, oh well. They are all going to try to kill each other over this. That is also good for us. But here's the bigger thing, and this is what I've said since the very beginning. It's why I've always supported this, even though my support means nothing. This is something else you Maxis need to learn. Your opinion on this meant nothing to it happening or not happening. It never did. Quit acting like you're influencing it because you're talking about it. You influence the people that listen to you. You do not influence the macro trend. This was going to happen because it is the best asset, like you've been saying. And since it is, it's only a matter of time before the BlackRocks of the world want a piece of the action. Okay? So that's going to happen. That's going to happen. Somebody in the live stream says, Maxi here. Yeah, you're probably not the kind I'm talking about, though. I would also call myself a Maxi. I'm calling them temporarily dumbass Maxis. One of them in particular talked shit about it the entire time, and the day after, it's like 250K now in play. Yeah, at least you changed tactics. A lot of them still haven't. Right? So there's this massive amount of money, and it's not just Joe with a 401k. It's the asset manager for the pension fund for the Boston, Massachusetts Police Department, and tens of thousands of other entities like that managing these retirement accounts. A lot of the pressure to get this ETF approved wasn't from Van Eck and BlackRock. It was from massive numbers of financial advisors, massive numbers of pension fund managers that said, we feel that we are literally committing malpractice by not having some exposure to Bitcoin in these portfolios because it's the best performing asset of the last 15 years, the end, full stop. So those people can now say, we're going to take 2% allocation into Bitcoin. And I know that doesn't sound like much. And Michael Saylor, go all in or nothing, whatever. That's not how the world works. Let's focus on how the world works. 2% of the pensions being managed would pump, not even existing new money in this year, will pump about $300 billion into Bitcoin. 2% of the contributions this year. Now, what is 2% of all of it? Start doing that math. And I want to show you a little bit of what's actually going on here. So let me show you something. This graphic is a year old, so it's out of date. And yet it's still very, very impressive. What it shows is the top 25 assets by market cap in the world. Chevron, MasterCard, Spider, Meta, Walmart. Those are at the bottom. Up at the top, you have things like gold being the king. $12 trillion in market cap. Next closest market cap, Apple, $2.1 trillion. This is last year. Apple's gone up significantly. It's about $2.8 trillion. Number 2 asset class in the world, Apple, $2.8 trillion. Think about that. Saudi Aramco at $1.8 trillion. They're still about right there. Microsoft, 1.7. They're closer to 2 million today. Silver still holding strong at right about 1.3 trillion, right where it was a year ago. The price is pretty static. The difference is all of these assets can have their supply expanded and or contracted. You're really not going to contract the supply of silver, but you can. Microsoft can buy back shares and contract. They can issue new shares and expand. So can Apple, so can MasterCard, etc. As of January last year, Bitcoin was already the 18th most valuable asset, sitting right over here, by market cap on planet Earth. But today, their market cap is around 900 billion. That means that today, right now, as I'm talking to you, the market cap value of Bitcoin puts it at the number 8 asset in the world by market cap, between Amazon slightly ahead of it and Berkshire Hathaway significantly behind it. Right now, before this thing has even traded, before the next halving, that's where we're sitting. That's damn impressive. Now you start looking at this money coming into it. Again, 1-2% of these pension funds is hundreds of billions of dollars competing for a shrinking available supply of Bitcoin. I want to kind of just give you some market cap numbers. So what do we need Bitcoin to get to take, assuming silver kind of stays static, to pass silver and become the 5th most valuable asset in the world? And that will also pass Amazon. It's a cakewalk from here. $69,000 will give a $1.38 trillion market cap. $1.38 trillion at $69,000. That's what's on your screen right now if you're watching the video. What happens? I don't think we're even pushing our luck to say Bitcoin hits $100,000 this cycle. It would be so out of touch with the previous cycles without, I'm saying if there was no ETF, that would still happen. That is a $2 trillion market cap. $2 trillion. That would put Bitcoin ahead of Saudi Aramco and just behind Apple as the number 3 most valuable asset on the planet by market cap. I don't even think that's in question. What would it take for Bitcoin to overtake Apple and sit with the only remaining asset that you can just buy a piece of and hold in a portfolio, being gold? Well, let's see what happens if we change this number here to 125,000. That goes to $2.5 trillion. 2.5 trillion. That actually would still be under Apple, because Apple, again, had a pretty good year last year and is about $2.8 trillion today. So we got to do a little better than 125. Let's go 135. 2.7 trillion, not quite enough. 145. 2.9 trillion. There's your number. At $145,000, Bitcoin becomes the 2nd most valuable asset class in the world. You don't think that's going to happen, then you have not been paying attention. And this is what it dumbfounds me. You start throwing out numbers like that, be like, oh, it can't go that high. But if I would have told you when it was $600 it was going to be $20,000 someday, you would have said that was crazy. And if I told you it would have ever hit 69,000, which it got within an ass hair of in the last all-time high, you would have said it was impossible 5 years ago, unless you're among the initiated. Now all this money is opening up. So again, let's just review who this is for. Pension fund managers, institutional money managers, individuals with IRAs and 401ks, high-frequency traders who will save money over the fees that they pay on an exchange. You know what that equals? Liquidity. Liquidity is good for Bitcoin, and over time it will reduce volatility, but we're not anywhere near that just yet. What do I think a reasonable price expectation for this cycle is? About $250,000 is the high, which it will retract from. But about $250,000. I would tell you that I would think it would be the next cycle. You know, you get into like the 2028 halving cycle where you're looking at potentially $1 million coin a piece. That's not that long in the world of building wealth. And I think there's something else that we need to understand here. I could be way low. And we need to understand the halving and its actual impact on price before we really appreciate what just happened. So before the ETF, the biggest occurrence in Bitcoin is halving. In other words, about every 4 years, we can predict it within days, the supply of Bitcoin gets cut in half. So in the very beginning, people mined Bitcoin on laptops that wouldn't even work today with today's operating systems. They were that shitty, and they were mining a lot of Bitcoin with it, but Bitcoin was not worth very much. And the block reward, every block was huge. But this was by design. So you had basically an inflationary supply. It leveled off and effectively becomes a deflationary supply. Because even though new coin is being generated, there's so little of it available, the actual amount you can buy and trade keeps shrinking. Most of the Bitcoin in existence has been held for more than a year. That's long-term holders. They don't sell easy. So there's a very small fraction of the 20 million in circulation that are actually available. Effectively, this is how I feel. The ETF has created an eternal halving. I know that doesn't seem to make sense. Think of it as an annual eternal halving. Because it doesn't matter that the supply of new Bitcoin is still coming in. And I think the block reward is going to like 3.15 Bitcoin per block. That's a lot less than 6.25 or whatever it was before. I think it's like going to go to 3.125, I think is where it's going to. So you have a supply shock. Well, what happens in the halving? Everybody talks about it. The price goes up prior to it. Everybody FOMOs in. The halving comes. There was woohoo, and then nothing happens. It goes sideways a little bit down, a little bit up, sideways a little bit down, a little bit up. And about 90 days after that, that's about how long it takes for the supply shock to move through the chain. And then it goes into it. And usually that's about when it'll hit its all-time high. Go look. And that usually has a pretty good year, the year following it. And then crypto winter comes. And then you have a build-up back. And then you have the next halving, and it goes over and over again. But the supply is about not the total amount of Bitcoin, the total amount of Bitcoin that people are willing to trade. And that number keeps getting smaller. What do you think happens when pension funds and shit are throwing $300-400 billion a year buying the coin? You're having not the total supply, but the available supply. And this now will go forever. And then the last piece, and this is the real reason I wanted this more than any other reason. There's, I'd say my number 2 reason, principle. If you can have an ETF for nickel or cadmium or gold or silver or dollars or yen or ruples or rupees or pesos or anything else, it's a monetary instrument or a commodity, then there's no reason Bitcoin should be excluded from that, given that it is one of the most valuable assets in the world. The end infinity. So that's principle. That's number 2, though. Number 1, I'm tired of hearing, they're going to ban Bitcoin. It's going to go to zero. Government going to shut it down. Blah, blah, blah. Shut up with your FUD. What I want to see is a lot less Bitcoin obituaries going into the 99 Bitcoins obituary write-up at this point. Because here's why. You don't fuck with teachers. You don't fuck with cops. I'm talking about the government here. You don't fuck with the auto workers union. You don't fuck with firefighters, right? There's just classes of people that if you're the government, those are the people you pacify, you don't fuck with. Okay? Unions, public servants, you don't fuck with it. And you know what you really don't fuck with? You don't fuck with their retirement. So by the end of this year, the average teacher, whether they're even aware of it or not, are going to have Bitcoin exposure in their retirement pensions. Same with firefighters, same with cops, etc. Once that happens, you make it where there is nothing that they can do to touch it without bringing down the pain of pissing off the left. Because most of those people, they're left. They're Democrats. And you know what? When the right gets angry and violent, it benefits the government. You ever notice that? Like, if right does anything, like all the media comes in, they're ultra MAGA, extremist, racist, misogynist, non-pronoun using crazy people. But when the left gets violent, it's fiery, but mostly peaceful. So if you're a congressman, if you're a senator, you do not want the United Auto Workers Union pissed off at you. You do not want the teachers union pissed off at you. The teachers union were able to extend lockdowns by writing letters from their union president to key personnel in the government. That's how much power they have. So when you get into a situation where those people have exposure to Bitcoin, it becomes like trying to fuck with an Indian reservation. It's a third rail. You do not touch it. So all of the crap about they're going to ban it, they're going to get rid of it, it's dead. Right now, it's already dead. It's twisting around. It's the actual death. Because Bitcoin was never going anywhere. If one person can run one node in one place, Bitcoin doesn't die. And where we're at now, we're so beyond the ability to kill Bitcoin. But now we've made further heavy-handed regulation of this commodity untenable to the government that was the biggest threat to it, which is our own here in the United States. So that's where we'll end my segment with that for the podcast. I am going to go ahead and answer just a couple questions here. I've noticed that we have some Bitcoin sucks people here in the live stream comment. You're not worth talking to anymore. You're not worth but those things have intrinsic value. You're too stupid for me to talk to you or answer your questions. If you don't think the largest, most secure computer network in the world that transacts with anybody anywhere in minutes in a way that is uncensorable and unstoppable and the most secure thing that humans ever built and measured by money, the most successful thing humans have ever done in a decade and a half in human existence has no intrinsic value, you're too stupid to talk to. And I don't care if you're in my audience and you like my other shit for this particular subject, you're too stupid for me to waste another verbal calorie on. So I'm going to answer a couple actual questions here. JD says, do you know anything about Wallet of Satoshi not being available in the US any longer? Went to transfer to Lightning Wallet and it won't let me move funds there anymore. I don't know how that would work. You either have it or you don't. Now, I do know some people had installed it under some test flight thing or whatever. I have Wallet of Satoshi. It still works. I moved the little bit of Bitcoin I had in it out of it because of this issue. If you have Wallet of Satoshi and there's money in it, I recommend if you live in America, you get out of it. They got tired of dealing with our government and said, fuck it, you're not worth it. There's plenty of other Lightning wallets. Pick one and use it. Kumi Ori Farm says, how will they compare to MSTR? Okay. Which I assume he means Bitcoin ETFs. They don't compare at all. They are not even in the same building. They're barely on the same continent. Other than I remember a long time ago, my wife was watching one of those daytime talk shows like an Oprah or something, but it wasn't Oprah. And the host said, what is the relationship between you and this woman to this guy? And he said, we are two people that occupy planet Earth, and that is all. Like, there's nothing else to be said about our relationship. I don't have one with her. I don't know her. She's fabricated. Now, whether he's telling the truth or not, I don't know. But that's how Master Link in a Bitcoin ETF is. They are two securities that you can purchase as securities. That's it. Master Link holds a shitload of Bitcoin. If anything, this is bad for Master Link's overall stock price, because there is a lot of money that flowed into MSTR stock to gain exposure to Bitcoin because they couldn't buy Bitcoin. But I don't think that overall long-term it's really bad for Masterlink stock, because they have more Bitcoin on their balance sheet than any other company that I'm aware of anywhere in the world. And so the overall value of the company will continue to go up. But they also, they're a stock in a company that has a function that is not owning Bitcoin. They're not a Bitcoin ETF, right? They're not a Bitcoin mutual fund. They are a company that makes predictive software for investors. That's what they actually do. So their stock price is going to be mostly contingent on the ability that they have to continue to do that well and keep their customers happy and have high revenue that they can continue to take and sweep surplus capital into Bitcoin. There is something that could happen to them, though. They may get pressure to be converted into something like an ETF or a mutual fund. But this is strange because, maybe a mutual fund. This almost happened to Google years and years ago. I'm sitting here talking to those watching the live stream. Most of you are on YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google. Most people do not know why. They don't know why Google spent something like $8 billion or whatever to buy YouTube back when they bought it. Well, because look at YouTube. But YouTube was not that valuable. Google spent more money than it was worth at the time because they could see where it was going, but they were also under pressure. The SEC was saying, hey, you guys have so much capital on hand that you're not putting to work. People buy stock in a company because they put capital to work. Your balance sheet is really cash heavy, guys. You need to put this money to work. And they went out and bought a bunch of shit, Google being the best one. There's been some accounting changes to how Bitcoin is looked at on a balance sheet. There's positive, and Saylor was very positive about it. And that's a good thing. But I don't know if they end up with a certain amount, if the government might pressure them and say, you got to put the capital to work. You're not an investment firm. You're a software production firm. So I'm not sure if they'll ever end up in that problem or not. But overall, if you've been invested in Masterlink because you thought it was a good investment, you wanted to gain exposure to Bitcoin, and the class of funds you had institutionally by charter was not able to access Bitcoin, at this point, if you want the Bitcoin exposure, the ETF makes more sense. Because you have a pure spot relationship. And this is the important thing about this Bitcoin ETF. Like if Bitcoin is $49,841, that should be the price of a share. And it will be within 1 or 2% of that number at all times, or the ETF will fail its mandate and its agreement with the government in it being approved. So again, I want you to understand one more time before I close down today. This cash creation thing that some of these maxis are talking stupid shit about being fiat. Remember what was that stupid movie that you guys pressured me to watch? And I finally watched it. I'm like, well, that's an hour and a half of my life I'm never getting back. The Princess and whatever the hell that movie is. I can't think of it now. But in it, there's a point where the guy's saying inconceivable, and finally the other guy says to him, you keep using that word. I do not think that word means what you think it means. Princess Bride, is that it? I think. Anyway, these people that are talking this shit about this cash creation, that phrase does not mean what you think it means. Again, the person brings cash into the fund. The fund manager has to acquire the underlying asset. And then the cash creates the share by buying the asset. Because let me tell you what you don't do. You don't invest like, oh, look, one of the biggest short supply things that we need for all these electric vehicles is nickel. And there's a fund where you can invest in nickel. NKL, I think, is the fund. NKL. Well, you don't freaking call up the fund manager or your broker of nickel and say, I'm holding effectively 10 metric tons of nickel and NKL. I want my nickel, send it to me. And they like bring semi trucks and dump 10 tons of nickel in your front yard. It doesn't work that way. That's not the purpose of an ETF. That's not the purpose of an ETF. Nobody does this. It makes a fund a little easier to manage if you can use in-kind exchange internally and externally so that somebody that has Bitcoin would have been able to just put Bitcoin into your fund. But nobody would do it anyway. That's why when the SEC objected to it, all the funds were just like, screw it, we won't do that then. We'll do cash in, cash out. We don't care. And so this is now here. It is what it is. And if you think it's bad, you just don't understand how it works. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions. I don't see any more. I see some haters. I don't care. TN Permaculture says Masterlink has no fees. Well, but your brokerage account does, where you buy and sell and trade stocks. And again, it may not have fees, but it is not equivalent to tracking the price directly. And it's a subjective. What is the value? Tommy D says they have 190,000, I think is what that number is on the balance sheet today. But then the market prices that in and says, what does that make your stock worth? I would not buy Masterlink today so that I could get exposure to Bitcoin, even if I was inside of a fund that I could only spend it that way. But again, I want to ask these maxis as I finish here today. Bill is a structural engineer that works for an aviation company. He got out of college at 22. He got his first job working there as an entry-level engineer. He's now a lead engineer at this aviation company, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, whoever, doesn't matter, you know. And he's doing his job. He's leading a team. He's been there 22 years now. He looks at his 401k. It says $987,000. Most of it's in things like Spider or large cap mutual funds or something like that, you know. And Tommy D here, right? Tommy D is his buddy. And he says, hey, Bill, have you heard about Bitcoin? And Bill goes, yeah, I've been thinking about it, but, you know, I'm not sure. And Tommy says, well, you make good money. You should put 5% of your money into Bitcoin. And Tommy said, or Bill says, you know, I don't actually have a lot of free cash flow. I've been putting 10% of my money to my retirement. I got another 20 years to go. I'm going to retire with millions of dollars. But yeah, I could put 5% of my money into that. What is he supposed to do? An emergency withdrawal from his 401k, get pumped in the butt by the government with taxes and fees so he can turn around and buy Bitcoin? Or does he go to Karen and HR and go, hey, Karen, I heard there's this new ETF for Bitcoin. There's a bunch of them. One's called HODL. Why don't you get our idiot that comes down here once a year and talks to us about our investing from Merrill Lynch or whatever on the phone and tell her, I want to be able to put my money into this. And Karen says, oh, it's already happening. Because, again, you got 11 companies trying to get into every single one of these plans. Because that's how they get their money now. That's how they get this to pay off. And you're going to tell him, don't do it? You know what you are? You're an idiot. But I'm trying to teach him about freedom. Bill doesn't care about freedom. Bill cares about his 401k plan in his retirement. Well, he could get rugged. Well, he could get rugged holding Exxon stock in there, couldn't he? It's the same class of investment. And you people that can't see this, you just don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. Chartreuse says, what happens with the ETF if there is no more Bitcoin to acquire hypothetically? The price keeps going up until they can buy enough Bitcoin to fill the order. There is a price for everybody where they will sell. But what ends up happening is the amount of Bitcoin needed to fill the order goes down as the price goes up. You understand that? So let's just make it rounded off easy. If Bitcoin was $100,000 a coin, many of us would be very happy about that. But that's rookie numbers in this game at this point, boys. It is. But let's say it's $100,000. And I have Bill with $100,000 in his 401k that he's willing to put into HODL. That's one of the, I think Van Eck has HODL. One of the companies anyway, that's their ticker symbol is HODL. So that's the one that's available in his plan. So he says, gets in his little online management and says, I want to allocate X number of funds to this new fund. So then the manager of HODL has to buy a Bitcoin. One, Bitcoin goes to $1 million. Bill wants to put $100,000. Yeah, in. So now how much Bitcoin does the fund manager have to buy? 1.1, 1/10. And the higher the number goes, the total supply necessary to fill the order goes down. That's what actually keeps this from running away completely parabolically. If you needed the same amount to fill the same order while the price went up, it would just go crazy. That's fiat. One more time. One more time. This is the best thing and an inevitable thing for Bitcoin if it is what we have said it is. There is no turning back now. And that is why it took 8 years and tens of millions of dollars for this to happen. Because you can't go back. Once you, like I said, once you start putting something into the hands of fund managers who are managing the pensions of teachers and cops and firefighters and other heroes that don't wear capes and giant unions like the UAW and little city governments all over the country, because that's the first place they're going to go. Because now you have 11 companies as your marketing department marketing your asset. That's what this did for you. Once you do that, you can't touch it. It becomes untenable. There are some people asking about Lightning wallets and all. There's a ton of them out there. Blue Wallet, Breeze, just a ton of different options. And there is Albi. Albi I like more as a low dollar value Zapathon type wallet. I have like 3 codes left, invitation codes for Albi. If you email me, I'll give them out first come, first serve. And it seems like I'm starting to form a relationship with Albi where I'll be able to get more, but a limited flow of that. They've basically decided they don't want to grow too fast, which is a very smart thing for a company to do. I'm also trying to get them on an episode of Bitcoin Breakout in the future. We had a little DM exchange going on Twitter, and they came back and said, we'll talk to our staff and see who the most survival-minded or survival-interested party is. And I returned that, and I said, just fill out the form. I don't give a shit if they care about survival. Money is a survival topic, and that's what I will actually finish with today. Those of you in my audience that get pissed off that I talk about Bitcoin, and you say, it's not a survival topic. Money is the most essential thing to your survival and your quality of life right now. Whether you ethically believe it should be or shouldn't, it is. The hardest form of money, therefore, which Bitcoin is a survival topic. If you found this video because somebody shared it with you or whatever, and you want to know more about actually building a resilient life as what I call a modern survivalist, check out the survivalpodcast.com. Tomorrow we'll have a Friday flashback for the audio podcast. I'll be back Monday with a totally new subject. Take care, guys. Thanks for tuning in today.